I'm excited to see, now that you've set this up for 5 and 6, is it going to be Florida A&M or A&M Florida? I guess we'll find out here in a few seconds.
Well, since you said that, we're trying a little something new. Now, we don't see the rankings, but obviously the people that build the graphics and our producer, the Cavman, he sees them. So Cavman tells us the most dramatic way to unveil these is to start at number 6. So let's look at the 6th ranked team in the initial rankings, and it is the Florida Gators. Florida's played brilliantly behind Kyle Trask, but their one loss was on the road against Texas A&M. Just ahead of the Gators at number 5 is, as expected, A&M. Jesse, what do you think about stacking them up, A&M, Florida, at this point?
I like it. I think the head-to-head at this point certainly has to matter. And listen, Texas A&M's been a dominant team. Kellerman's been fantastic. Last time we saw them play, they blew out South Carolina 48-3. Now the question is, will the head-to-head lose value down the road if a Florida were to play Alabama and beat them in the SEC title game? An Alabama team, by the way, that beat Texas A&M by 28 points. So this is showing me the head-to-head matters in the committee's minds now. How much weight will that carry, though, down the road? I think that's a big question. I can almost guarantee you if they win the SEC championship, it will matter enough to keep Florida behind Texas A&M.
Exactly.
But for the start, that's where they are. So Capman says we're going to number 1. So let's go to the number 1 ranked teams, and it is Alabama. For the 19th week in the history of the college football playoff rankings, the Crimson Tide on top. No one else is close to that. In fact, it's more than double the number of times anyone else has been at number 1. Just behind the Crimson Tide at number 2. The Fighting Irish of Notre Dame owning that victory against Clemson, and 1-2 is just the way it looks in the AP poll. So now we know who 3, 4 are. Let's see in what order. And number 3 is Clemson. Now, this too will probably take care of itself, given that it is likely that Clemson and Notre Dame will have a rematch in the ACC championship game. And then Ohio State is at number 4. It'll be interesting to note whether the Buckeyes are at 4 because of eye test or number of games that they've played, far fewer than the other teams in the top 6 so far, although they're starting to catch up with Texas A&M with the COVID issues that the Aggies have had recently. So a little bit of a surprise to me anyway that Clemson's ahead of Ohio State, but I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world for week 1. What do you think about it, Kirk?
Exactly what I had. I had Bama, Notre Dame. I moved Clemson over them this week to 3 and moved Ohio State down to 4. And you can say, well, they've only played 4 games. We had no problem moving them up to 2 after they played 1 or 2 games. So it has everything to do with the eye test. And Ryan Day would be the first one to tell you that they have not played up to their bar and where they expect to be, especially in the secondary and pass defense, protecting Justin Fields when he's throwing the football. So they've got some things to shore up. As you said, it'll play itself out. You know, with the teams that are ahead of them that still have to play, there's a very good chance if they were to win out, they'd move up to the top 2 or 3. So it might be a moot point. But for now, I think the committee got it right moving Ohio State, even though they are undefeated, and Clemson has 1 loss. I think Clemson should be at 3.
Kirk, it's great to see right now, first rankings, that they're ready to say, you got 1 loss, Clemson, in your column, and I still think you're a better team than Ohio State. I think that's a great message for us to receive. I love seeing that, because I do think in the end, I want them to pick who they think the best team are, not who has a 0 in the column. But my gosh, BYU, 14, watching them throughout this season, like, that was absolutely nuts to me, just watching how potent they've been, how fun they've been, how dominant they are, by the way, not just analytically, but physically when you turn on the tape. But I didn't think Clemson would be ahead of them, Joey, just because if Clemson had a chance to play Florida State and remind us, like, Trevor Lawrence being back, I thought they might have moved them up. But without Trevor Lawrence and them playing last week, kind of surprised they are ahead of Ohio State, though.
Yeah, this is actually how I had it, David. I'd moved Clemson ahead of Ohio State this past week, too. And back to what Kirk said, I do think it has a lot to do with the eye test. And yes, Ohio State is 4-0, but I think you've seen enough now from the Buckeyes through 4 games to know they're not as talented a team as they were a year ago when they reached the playoff. And that's fine. If Ohio State wins out, they're going to get in the playoff, but they don't have J.K. Dobbins. They don't have Chase Young. They don't have the same pass rush. The big issue has been in the secondary, and watching them against Indiana, watching them against Penn State, losing in man-to-man coverage busts, guys running wide open, 491 passing yards they gave up to the Hoosiers this past weekend. And of course, Justin Fields probably had his worst game as a Buckeye. Certainly no questions about his talent level. But to me, I think the committee gives Clemson a ton of credit for going up to Notre Dame without Trevor Lawrence, without all those playmakers on defense, and taking it to double overtime. It was a good loss, and I think they give them credit. I think the committee right now looks at Clemson. They played way more games, but I think they look at them as a team and say, if healthy, this team is a more complete team than Ohio State, and that's why I think they move them ahead of the Buckeyes, and I think it was the right decision.
And I would say I'm surprised. I'm not alarmed, but I am surprised. And we talk about the Clemson game against Notre Dame, and they had some injuries. But it's the week before against Boston College where they also didn't look good in that game, found a way to win it in the second half, played much better. But that first half, they didn't look good. And so when you look at this, I think the top 4 teams in the country are sitting in 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it really doesn't matter what that order is.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.